All right. Okay, so this is your first assignment for Linguistics 151. It's due next Tuesday, so you get about a week to do this. And so, like I said, all your assignments are going to cumulatively add up to your final project, right? So all the assignments for this class is geared towards making you think about your final project, your language, the language that you are going to create for this class. So to begin to do that, what I want you to do for this assignment is I want you to look at 3 different languages. By 3 different languages, I mean 3 different languages from 3 different types of society. So this is really going to get you started on looking into languages that are different from English or any of the other languages that you might be familiar with, like Romance languages, which are more urban societies, because a lot of people speak it. They're more urbanized languages than some of the other languages that I want you to look at for this assignment. So the 2 other societies that I've chosen for you is a hunter-gatherer society and a pastoral agricultural society. So if you've taken a anthropology class, some of these terminology might be more familiar to you, but feel free to read up. Like I said, using Wikipedia is completely okay for me as long as you tell me that you used Wiki as a resource for your assignment. And obviously plagiarism is not okay, so you can't copy paste a paragraph from Wiki into your assignment and tell me that you wrote it, right? So that's not okay. But you can definitely consult Wikipedia. You can definitely consult any of the online material that you Google and find. But just let me know that that was the resource and the source from which you got your data from. So examples of hunter-gatherer societies, a lot of indigenous tribal societies were hunter-gatherer societies. So these are societies, many years ago would go around foraging for food, and that's why they're called as hunter-gatherer, right? So they hunt animals and they gather food. So that's where the terminology is coming from, hunter-gatherer. As opposed to pastoral agricultural societies are a little different from hunter-gatherer societies in that, most of them were nomadic, the pastoral agricultural societies. So they would move from one area to another geographical area in search of food, in search of land to cultivate crops on, etc. So they're 2 different kinds of societies, and I want you to look at the languages that are part of that community. So examples of hunter-gatherer languages involve languages such as Sentinelese, found in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the very close to South Asia, and other examples of languages. Again, a lot of these indigenous tribal languages found on isolated islands were hunter-gatherer languages. Pastoral agricultural languages, Sami, the tribe called Sami tribe as an example of a pastoral agricultural tribe and language. The Bedouin tribe, again, very nomadic. They move from one place to the other. So the idea behind this assignment is for you to see how different languages in these societies are different because of the socio-cultural geographic location that they kind of developed in. So that's really what I want you to do. Many of them have grammar books. Some of them are available in the library, but again, you can Wikipedia it or look online for sources. And what I want you to do for each of these languages are to identify the sounds, right? So for example, English has the sounds r and l, but Japanese does not make that distinction, for example, right? So tell me what the sound systems are for these languages. And again, you don't have to do, you don't have to know too much linguistics to do this. I just want you to look at a source online or a book, a grammar book, and then just let me know, right? Like just take it from there. If it's a sound chart or something like that, let me know that this was the source that you got this from, right? So that's all I'm really looking for. I don't need you to make these kind of distinctions that, oh, English has these sounds, but this particular language I'm looking at does not have those sounds. I'm giving this to you just so that you can have an example of what I'm really looking for with respect to the sound systems of the language. You can also look for information about certain combinations of sounds. So for example, what do I mean by combinations of possible sounds? In English, you can have words that begin with sp, like splash, but you cannot have words that begin with s and b, sp, zb, right? Very difficult for English to have sounds that starts with s and b. It's not allowed phonotactically, right? So that's what we mean by combination of sounds. So again, maybe the grammar book will tell you that there are certain combinations of sounds that are okay in the languages that you're going to choose. What word order does that language have? English has a word order, subject, verb, and object. So in English, you can say, John loves Mary, where John is the subject. Love is the verb, and the object of the loving is Mary. So that's a subject, verb, and object word order. But the same sentence in Japanese has a different word order. So Japanese has a subject, object, verb word order. So John, Mary loves. That's how you would say this in Japanese. So again, a lot of the grammar books will tell you upfront that say you're choosing for the urban language, say you're choosing something like Filipino, Tagalog, or something like that. It will tell you that the word order of Tagalog is subject, verb, and object, right? So that's all you need to do. You just need to find that. Again, you don't need to do your own research to find out what the word order is. A lot of these grammar books, a lot of the language material that you can find on these languages will tell you upfront what that word order is. So that's what I'm looking for with respect to word order. Parts of speech. So what different kinds of lexical categories does the language have? Does that language have nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, or postpositions, etc.? And again, not all of these are universal. Very often nouns and verbs are considered to be universal, but not adjectives, adverbs, or prepositions. So again, maybe, hunter-gatherer communities did not have adverbs or prepositions, right? So that's really what I'm looking for in this. Writing system, does that particular language have a separate writing system? A lot of languages do have different writing systems, different from the Roman script. English uses the Roman alphabet, but Japanese, for example, uses the hiragana and the katakana kind of script. So does your language of choosing have a different writing script? Just tell me that terminology, right? That's all I'm looking for. This language uses X writing script. That's all you need to tell me there. Does the language have verb conjugation? So what are conjugations in English? So in English, to signal differences in time and aspect, you use conjugations on the verb. So you can say, I sleep, you sleep, but he or she sleeps. Right, and that's at the end of the verb is the conjugation. It's a third person conjugation, suggesting that the person who's doing the sleeping is a third person, right? It's not me, it's not you, it's a third person, right? So does the language that you have these kind of verbal conjugations? Maybe it does not, right? And so at that point, you just tell me that, this language does not use verbal conjugation. And what about gender? English does not mark gender on nouns. So, whether you have a table versus a chair, it's the same thing in English. There's no grammatical gender marking on English, but many of you speak Spanish, and you know that Spanish is a classic language that marks gender on nouns. So you have A marking versus the O marking, where A stands for feminine gender and O stands for masculine gender. So what about gender marking in these languages, grammatical gender marking on nouns in these languages? And again, all this is easily available in, like I said, Wikipedia or any grammar book that you might know. If you're like Landon, you have already grammar books in your bookshelf, so you can probably get one from there and look. But just tell me what your source is, right? That's really what is more important than if you take something from Wikipedia, if you take something from a grammar book, give me that in the reference section and say that this is where that information is coming from, right? And again, I don't want you to take a paragraph from Wikipedia because that counts as plagiarism. And so do not verbatim take something from a book or Wikipedia and paste it into your assignment. Try to write it in your own words. Obviously now, like, the sound system, the sound chart, for example, you cannot make that up, right? I mean, that you will have to take that verbatim from a book or Wikipedia, but then you tell me that the citation, right? Like this was taken from this particular website or, Any questions on this assignment? It's a 3-page assignment. I want you to do it in Times New Roman font with 1.5 spacing. Any questions on this or concerns?
Yeah, this is Olivia. I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific format you want us to have our sources in?
No. I'm familiar with MLA and APA. That's what most of my students do their sources and references in, but I really don't have a preference. Just give me the source. That's all I care about. This is not, I'm not testing you for your writing skills or your, reference ability. I'm really trying to get you to think of your final project and kind of get you ideas on what you might want your language to look like. So just give me the source, APA, MLA, Chicago format, whatever format you're familiar with. I don't really care.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So for the urban society, don't do English. Okay, I know English is an urban language. That's, everybody knows English. So let's keep English aside. If you want to do ASL, that's fine. Sign language is fine. But if you, Spanish is fine. But just let's leave aside English for now, okay? Because I know that's an easy one and everybody knows it. Any other questions? Do you feel comfortable doing this assignment for next week? Yeah? Okay. I mean, I do, I see Landon, you've raised your hand. I'll come back to you. I do have a late assignment policy. You can submit your assignment late up to 3 times in a semester. So, if you feel like you will not be able to do this by Tuesday, you can get an extension by a week. So, do read my late syllabus policy in the syllabus because, I don't want you to get you really stressed out about doing this assignment, especially if this is something that you've never seen before, I mean, never done anything like this before. So, Landon?
I figured I might as well ask, given that a lot of information online that is like really good and thorough about languages is over constructed languages. Mm-hmm. So would you allow a constructed language to be one of our 3 examples?
No, because that's your assignment too. We are coming to constructed languages where you will look at, a constructed language that you like or you know of, and look at similarities and dissimilarities, assignment 2. So first we start with natural language, then we go into constructed language, and then you go into your own language. That's kind of the progression. So yeah, so for this, just use natural languages that already exist. And yeah. Anything else? Any other questions? All right, so let's stop share, and I will I pause the recording. I don't know. I don't want to miss. Sometimes it just disappears, the recording. So let's just continue on with this. Let's go into, are you ready for your prompts for your final project? All right, let's get into, wait, is that the same? Am I sharing assignment 1 again? What do you see on my screen? Is it the same assignment?
It's the prompts.
Oh, are these the prompts? But I am seeing assignment 1 again. That's so strange. Okay, let me close out assignment. Okay, I'm recording. Okay. Let me close out assignment 1. Maybe that'll work. Okay, that's better. Great. Okay, so prompts for your final project. This will also be up on Blackboard. So like I said, I have taught 151 for the last 5 years. So these are the 2 prompts that I usually like to give out, which really get my students excited. And I find that a lot of you fall into either the science fiction category or the fantasy category. Though in the past, I've had students who wanted to do both science fiction and fantasy, like merge the 2 prompts together. That's completely okay as well. So this is your prompt. You have been commissioned to invent a language for one of these 2 projects. You can choose either the science fiction or the fantasy, depending on what you like better. If you are part of the science fiction crew, you are a crew of human astronauts. You have come across an ancient tube on a deserted planet, right? And they think it's deserted, the science fiction crew. One of the team is a linguist, so that's you, who begins to decipher inscriptions and activates a machine which throws her crewmate's mind back in time to when the planet was inhabited. But it also throws the mind of one of the aliens forward into the crewmate's head, so that he is, to all intents and purposes, an alien amongst his own crew. His speech is in the alien language and is to be subtitled, as is the speech of the aliens back in time. So if you are choosing the science fiction prompt, you are creating an alien language. There are a lot of different ways that you can do this. Okay, it could be a really bare language because, you know, I don't know, maybe aliens don't have really complicated language, right? Or maybe aliens really do have very complicated languages. I don't know. It's really up to you. It's really up to you and your creativity and what you think you should be doing. Okay, so this can go a lot of different ways, right? I mean, there's a lot of alien languages already that exist, so you might want to start looking at that, kind of take inspiration from that and see, you know, what's been done before. So that's a science fiction prompt. Let's look at the fantasy prompt. A fantasy TV series where the invisible veil that separates humankind from the supernatural world is breaking down. Individuals who, to all intents and purposes, were as human as anyone else, are revealed as supernatural creatures who feed on human souls. Their ability to blend in is being lost, and they even stop being able to speak a human language. One of the first people to find out about this is a Wichita cop whose area is College Hill, and whose first encounter is seeing one of the people she's arrested turn into a strange blurred creature whose English is replaced by fragments of a strange language. Totally believable, right? Like, yeah, can definitely happen in Wichita College Hill. So this is, again, like I said, if you want to choose one of the prompts, you're free to do that. If you think that you want to take some ideas from the science fiction prompt and blend it with the fantasy prompt and make it into a sci-fi fantasy prompt, you're welcome to do that as well. I've had students do that in the past. Okay, so really the floor is yours, the creativity is yours. I just want to see your creativity and what you can do with these prompts. Okay, that's really what I'm looking for. What is your task? Well, your task is to design the relevant language depending on the prompt that you choose. So first you read what other people have done in this area. So those are the case studies that we are going to be getting into, you know, a couple of weeks from now. And then we write a short summary of an invented language that you find interested in. So that's assignment 2, a summary of a conlang that you're interested in. And then you start designing aspects of your own language. The producer is commissioning various people to do this. So you're in a group that you have to work with. So depending on whether you're in the science fiction prompt or the fantasy prompt, I will divide you into 2 groups so that you can work with your group, you know, share information with each other, take inspiration from each other, you know, steal ideas from each other even, right? Completely okay to do that. So that's what we are going to be doing. And then for final payment and selection as to whose language will be used, that's the grade that I'm going to assign you. You need to submit a grammar with full glosses and commentary. You can also submit some recordings of your language or sing a song in your language. I've actually had a student sing a song in the language that she created. She was a singer. Let me put that out. So she was studying music at Wichita State. So I think, you know, she really enjoyed doing that. It's not necessary by any means, but surprise me. I like to be surprised. What I want you to do is I want you to create a 200-word grammar of your own invented language. When you suddenly hear the word 200, you think, oh my God, like what it's 100, level class. Why is she making us do a 200-word grammar? It's not a lot, trust me. Once you start getting into the groove of it, it'll really come easily to you, right? It's always that starting trouble. Beginning something new is always difficult, but when you start really liking what you're doing, it'll come to you, I promise. Okay. And by 200 words, you can start with the word sleep, like we saw in assignment 1, and have sleeping as another word, right? I'm not saying that they should be all 200 unique words of the language. You can definitely add in conjugations. You can definitely add in compounding, or any of the other morphological things that we will be talking about later on in the morphology sections, and create new words. So 200 words, not all unique. Build on the words that you have. I always suggest having the first 100 words, right, giving a sort of history to the fictional world. So what is the word for nose if your alien has a nose in that language, or head, or arms, right? Maybe the alien does not have arms. Maybe the alien only has legs, right? Maybe the alien has, arms and legs together, right? Like there's a word for that or something. It helps to be highly visual when you're creating your own language. It helps to visualize what your alien looks like, right? What this strange fantasy creature looks like. When you have a vision of your character, of the main character who's doing the speaking, it's just so much easier to get into their shoes, right? And see what you think your language should look like. I often tell my students to start with a character, and then I tell them to look at the socio-cultural setting that you're creating for that character, right? College Hill. Okay. So now you see, right? Oh, brick houses, ancient brick houses, right? Maybe you need a word for that. Maybe you need a word for, trees that are native to Wichita versus, the terrain of the planet that your science fiction prompt is based on, right? Have a name for the planet, have a name for the species. So you see how easily you can get to 200 words for your language, right? Once you start to do this. The remaining 100 words should detail like the sound system. So, what phonology you used, the morphology. So do you have compounding in your language? Do you use agglutination? Do you use noun incorporation? Is your language really simple with absolutely no conjugations and inflections? The structure of the noun phrase. So what do I mean by the structure of the noun phrase? So in English, if you have a word like boy, you can have the boy versus a boy, right, with difference in meaning, or boys, which is the plural without any, additional material in the front. So what does your language do, right? Maybe your language is like Spanish, like la casa, right? So you have a determiner that actually agrees in gender with your noun, right? Again, the possibilities are plenty on what you want to do. Issues of word order. What is your word order of your language? Does it have case and agreement? I will get into all this in detail when we get into the sound system and the grammatical structure of languages. And the lexicon. Lexicon is basically, your 200 words that you're going to give me. Okay, so that is your final project. I want you to start thinking about it now. It takes time to build a language, right? If you want to do a really good language and something that you really think that you want to keep building on over the years, it takes time. So I really want you to start thinking of right now. Any questions on the prompts or any questions on the final project?
Where can we find the rubric for the final project?
Oh, that's what I'm going to share right next after this.
Thank you.
Anything else? No? Okay, let's get into the rubric of the final project. This one, oh, see, again, you probably can see it, but I still see the prompts for the final project. Computer. Okay, let me close out that and then I'll open up the rubric. That should work. All right. So this is the rubric of your final project. So it's due on Thursday, May 12th. Okay, in finals week, because you're going to take your finals the last week of classes. So I like to do that so that you get that 1 week to then work on your final project and refine it. I prefer a soft copy, but in the past, I've had students keep, they keep like notebooks. I highly recommend, again, to keep a notebook for your final project, because sometimes you might be, in another class and you might be thinking of a word for your language and it suddenly crops up. So, keep a notebook or keep it on your phone, right, as a note on your phone or something like that. And students have preferred to submit the hard copy to me, like the notebook to me, if it's neat enough. And that's okay. But just let me know so that I know that I need to go to the office to pick up the, since it's finals week, I might not be there. So soft copy preferable, but no hard feelings if you want to submit a hard copy. This is how I want your final project to look like. And you're welcome to copy paste directly from the assignments you've completed on your constructed language, and that will be assignments 2, 3, 4, etc. What's the name of your language? Very often you think that you want to start with the name and then create the language. I have found over the last 5 years that it's the opposite. You create the language and then create the name of the language. Some people have actually just had nameless languages because it's so difficult to find a name for your language. It's not easy, right? So if you don't have a name, that's completely fine. But if you have a name, tell me what the name of your language is. A brief paragraph on the prompt that you chose and why you chose that prompt. So why did you go the science fiction route? Why did you go the fantasy route? What are some movies or some TV shows that you've been watching in that science fiction prompt or fantasy prompt that's really helped you in understanding your constructed language? What's your storyline and character sketch, right? So this is different from the prompt. So the prompt is just, it just helps all of you to start thinking about your language, but you need to have a storyline within that, and you also need to have a character sketch. It really helps you, I've found in the past, to have concrete details of your language when you have a concrete storyline and a character sketch. So I think that's really important. Your phonetic inventory, so that's the sound system of your language. You will be creating a phonetic inventory for your language using the IPHR. Okay, I will be helping you do that, so don't freak out about it. But that's something that I expect you to do in one of the assignments, and then that'll feed into your final project as well. 200 words, they should all be in IPA, right? So you will have a lot of practice writing things in IPA. Some of you already have a lot of practice doing things in IPA, so it's going to be easier for you. If you've never you looked at the International Phonetic Alphabet before, I will teach you the IPA as we go along. So you will have a lot of practice doing IPA before you get to the 200 words for your final project. Along with their meaning. So what does it mean? What does the words mean? The word order of the language, morphological patterns with some examples and some sentences. Very often my students just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way to 200, right? Just number it, write the word, right? So let me give you a quick example of what something would look like. So, it could be, I'll just do A, let's make up a word right now. So let's maybe something like that, okay? Because I don't have an IPA keyboard, so I'm just using the regular keyboard. But say this is a new word in a language that I created, right? So this is an IPA, and then I would give the meaning. If this is a simple word, so I will just leave it like that. There's no morphological breakdown for this. But, if I want to do a morphological breakdown, maybe, I can do something like that, suggesting that fal is the simple word and u is a inflection or a conjugation, and then I can give a meaning to fal u, say good, and er, right, the comparative marker, to mean better or something like that. More good, right? Better, right? So you see how you can create your own morphology, you can create your own word structure, etc. And you will have a lot of practice before you get into creating those 200 words. We will do a lot of exercises in class as well, and in groups, and all that. So, and some sentences. Again, this is not a hard and fast thing. If you don't have sentences for me, I'm not going to grade you down. I'm a very easy grader. People who have taken classes with me in the past will know this. I really look for hard work, right? I really look for people who have tried hard in attempting their assignments. There is really, no right and wrong answer, if you ask me. So, again, with a constructed language, it's about creativity. There's no right conlang and wrong conlang, right? So that's not how I grade. So if you cannot create sentences, don't worry, okay? That's why I said some sentences, but yeah. And again, if you want to sing in your language, you want to have a conversation with somebody else in your language, feel free to add anything else to this prompt. But this is what I'm looking for. Anything else, surprise me, I'm happy to see it. Again, I have office hours on Tuesdays between 11 and 12 via Zoom. The Zoom link is on Blackboard, so you should be able to access that. Always drop in if you have a question on your final project or any of your assignments. I'm happy to help you. You also have a final project presentation, and that's been scheduled for April 21st, 26th, and 28th. You will be given 10 minutes to present your final project. 8 minutes for your language and 2 minutes of questions from your friends and me. In the past, students have created PowerPoint slides. It really helps for people to visually see your language, your sound systems, character sketches, if you're good at illustrations. I've had a couple of students in the past who are, graphic design people. So they've created their own characters, and all that. You don't need to draw it. You also have really fancy software these days that can do that for you, or you may know a friend who really knows how to illustrate well. You can maybe ask them to help you out as well, but it's, again, not required, right? If you have it, good enough. If you don't have it, that's fine as well. And if you don't want to do a PowerPoint, have a handout with all the details, because it really helps to grab people's attention when you have something to look at, rather than just talk. So this is what I want you to do in the 8 minutes. I want you to tell the class about your language. So again, begin by talking about the prompt, why you chose it, a brief insight into the world building process. The world building process is what we mean by create your character sketch, create your storyline, create the world, right? The planet, or College Hill, Wichita, wherever you're, basing the story on. What is the sound system? Why did you choose certain sounds, and why didn't you choose certain sounds? So let me give you an insight on what that will look like. So one of my students in the past created an alien that does not have a tongue. If you don't have a tongue, it's very difficult to produce sounds, right? Because you really need your tongue to talk. So what would that language look like? So you need to think a bit about it from that anatomy point of view as well, right? Maybe that alien can use a lot of gestures, right? Or sign language, but cannot use the tongue. So, speech is really, really, a deficit for that alien, right? So those are the kind of things that I'm talking about. Why did you choose certain sounds? Another student had made, some sort of fairy, I think, like in a fantasy world, and she really didn't want that fairy to have any guttural sounds, because guttural sounds sound very rough. So these are sounds like right, like things that you use from the back of your throat, like you're clearing your throat or something. So she avoided all those sounds. She avoided sounds like g, ch, j, right? Sounds that sound very hard, and she was using a lot of those l, m, r, right? Very fairy-like, flowy kind of sound. So that's why the world building process is really important for you. Depending on what your character looks like, depending on, is it a fairy? Is it an alien? Is it a sea creature, a sea animal? Your language is going to look very different. The sound system is going to look very different. Then tell us about the morphology. Show us some examples of words. If you have any sentences, again, show us your sentence. And the presentation is really meant to give you feedback in order for you to refine and create that final project for May 12th. Any questions on the rubric? Nope. All right, great. I will put all this up on Blackboard so that you have access to all this, as well as your assignment 1. So you will be doing that for next week. Let's get into the lecture for today. All right. Okay. So this is lecture 3. We are getting into the design features of language. So let's kind of recap where we were last week. So we started looking at language as a system of signs last week. And I said that going back to Charles Sanders Peirce, the philosopher's work on signs, there are 3 different kinds of signs. A sign can be iconic, indexical, or symbolic. And I showed you evidence that language is a symbolic kind of sign. Why? Because we can isolate different morphemes in language, and depending on what morphemes you're using, the meaning associated with that particular word actually changes. We also looked at translational equivalence in language. So when you had the word for dog in English and in Spanish and Amharic, they are completely arbitrary in nature, which suggests that that's symbolic. And also synonyms, right? So you have multiple synonyms for words. So we looked at sick, which have synonyms such as ill, right, etc. And again, they look completely different from each other because they're completely arbitrary. And they also have iconically expressible meanings, but we also saw exceptions of iconic and indexical morphemes, such as mimetic, onomatopoeic words such as bow bow, right, or meow meow, etc. So let's get into this week. What we are going to do is we are going to get into the 2-part structure of sign systems, right? What are the 2 parts to any symbolic sign, right? Any language has a lexicon, or you can think of it as a dictionary, right? And a grammar and rules that actually tell you how to combine words together, how to combine sounds together to create new words, etc. So a lexicon and a grammar, right? These are the 2 parts of any sign system. I want to start illustrating this with a very simple sign system. So we all know what this is. This is a traffic light, right? When you drive to campus or you're driving home, you have to follow the rules of the traffic light. Otherwise, you're going to get into an accident. Nobody wants to get into an accident. We can think of the traffic light as a very simple sign system, in that it has 2 parts. It has a lexicon and a grammar. The lexicon of the traffic light has 3 signs: the red light, the yellow light, and the green light, right? That's a lexicon. And the grammar of the system has 3 rules. So here is a lexicon, right? You have a meaning and a form. Every lexicon has a meaning and a form and a mapping from meaning to form. So when you have the meaning stop, you only see the red light. The green light is off, the yellow light is off. When you have the meaning go, you only see the green light and not the red light and the yellow light. And proceed with caution is the yellow light, right? And then you don't have the red light and the green light. Now you can already imagine if both the red light and the green light came on at the same time, what would you do, right? I mean, that's counterintuitive to what you would do at a traffic light. You can't both stop and go at the same time, right? You have to choose one or the other, right? So this is why rules are important for any sign system, because rules actually tell you what to do. Any traffic light all across the globe, all across the world, have the particular ordering of the lights. You see the red at the top, you see the yellow, and then you see the green. There is no traffic light in the world which has green, yellow, and red. The reason being that if you are an American driving a car in Italy, you know, you don't really want to have the opposite sign system, because your mind is just so tuned to seeing red, yellow, and green, right? So you want to keep that universality of the ordering. Only one color is lit at a time. Again, like I said, if you have multiple colors lighting, it's really difficult, and it adds to ambiguity and confusion. So the sequence of lights is always green, yellow, red, right? You have green, go, yellow, caution, the light is going to change, and then you see the red, right? So that's a sequence of lights. Now you can always add other possibilities to the lexicon, right? So here is an example of left turn yield on flashing yellow, right? So the yellow arrow just keeps flashing. And what that means is, you know, if you're waiting to take a left turn, you have to yield to oncoming traffic when you see the flashing yellow sign, right? So again, it's a kind of caution, but only for left turns, right? Only if you're trying to take a left turn. What we have done in this case is that we have added expressiveness to the simple sign system. We had a simple sign system with 3 signs in the lexicon. Now we have added a 4th one, right? We have added an extra possibility to the lexicon. Here are another possibilities, again, increasing the complexity, increasing the expressiveness of the system. You have, you know, simultaneous signs like red and yellow at the same time, right? Again, it causes confusion, yes, which is why you don't see that very often, but you can think of having a new meaning to the system, right? Something like, okay, now you really need to stop going, or something like that, right? Like just stop, just don't proceed further, right? Or something like that. So you can always add new things to the system to increase expressiveness and create complexity. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to do a breakout session so that you can discuss in your group and try to come up with other sign systems. Now, the most complex sign system is human language. So I want you to keep aside human language, and I want you to keep aside traffic lights. And I want you to discuss and come up with maybe 5 different sign systems. Does that sound doable? Yeah. Okay. So how many of us are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'm going to make 3 breakout rooms. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to open all the rooms and I will bring you all back in 5 minutes.
Like the gear shifter in a car. Would that work?
I think so, yeah.
Like, you know, you put it in P for park, you put it in R for reverse,
I think so.
N for neutral, D for drive. Could we base it off of that maybe?
Yeah, I like that. I thought
Although you
of,
can't really make any combinations to that.
yeah, well, you can't do combinations of traffic light either, so.
But we could add like one item where if you put it there, it makes the car go sideways.
Yeah.
Something like that, maybe.
I'm thinking the thing that came to mind
Where it
for
could
me
fly.
was semaphore, like the
Semaphore?
flag. Yeah. The flag thing that like the Coast Guard and Navy use where they hold up flags.
Oh, okay. That could work.
So that's definitely near linguistic.
You guys think like emojis would count?
Professor Menon, we're a little bit lost maybe on what a sign system is exactly. I know we've been talking about it, but I'm just not totally clear what
Yeah,
that
so
constitutes.
it could be anything, right? I mean, think of things like language, but not as complicated as language. So a traffic light is a sign system, right? Because it tells you what to do and how do you interpret how to do things, because you know that the green light means go, the yellow light means caution, and red means stop. And everybody knows that. That's a universal thing, right? So think of things that are similar to that. Again, it needn't be, as complicated as language. Something as simple as a traffic light, which has like maybe 3 things in a lexicon and rules for you to follow. That's a sign system.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. I'm just jumping in between rooms. Just ignore me. I'm going to leave.
Kind of going along with the traffic light is like the crosswalk signal, I guess, because it's like
Oh, something else that I'm staring right at it is like when I embroider, we have like a key of signs that tell us where to put each color and like how to mix the threads. And so like a diamond means olive green. I don't know where any diamonds are on here, but it symbolizes a color that you put at a specific point.
You know those ribbons and like the color of the ribbons mean like different things. So like a pink ribbon would be like breast cancer, and like other ribbons
Yeah,
signify, yeah.
that's a good one.
Yeah. So what about like brand logos? Those are kind of signs. Like you can see the Starbucks woman, it doesn't even have to say Starbucks, but you look at her and you're like, oh, that's the Starbucks lady.
Sorry, I thought we were supposed to create like our own sign system.
No, Niall, no.
Oh, okay.
Existing sign systems. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
don't need to create your own. Yes.
Okay.
What about like on like food packages when it's like gluten free, and so it'll have like a gluten in a circle and then a cross, a slash through it, or like peanut free, so it'll have like a peanut.
Okay, I think we're all back. How did that go? Good. Okay. Okay. Let's start with Kelly, Landon, and Megan. What did you come up with?
Landon, why don't you take this since you have the notes?
Sure. Okay, so some of ours are more obvious than others. So the obvious ones that we came up with were semaphore, which is the flags that the Coast Guard and the Navy hold up to communicate across long distances. Very obviously a communicative system. Hobo code, which back when hoboing was a popular thing, they would like leave marks on houses, like here's an angry dog, here's a nice lady who'll give you some food, etc. Now we get into the more noodly ones that I don't know. Similar to light switch, or similar to traffic lights, gear shift, the gear shift thing, because a passenger can see what gear you're in, and if it's in park, they know that they're stopped for that, even without looking outside. Even more basic than that is a light switch, and it's up. You know the lights are on. When it's down, you know the lights are off. Even if you're totally blind and can't even see light, if you feel the wall and you see it up, you know the lights are on. Off, you know it's up. And then this one, I don't know about this one. Music, specifically, the parts of music that are universal across humanity. Like all humans who are not tone deaf can experience an octave the same way, can experience a perfect fifth the same way. And those have meaning, and an octave particularly has meaning in like all human cultures.
I like the examples. Definitely the first two ones are, you know, the hands down that's obvious ones, like you said, right? I really like the gear shift one, Kelly. I know you mentioned that while I was in your breakout room. It's a very simple sign system. You have 4 things in the lexicon and rules, right? I mean, 4 different rules depending on that. And I know Kelly mentioned to add expressiveness to the system, you could maybe add a new one where your car could go sideways, right? So that's a really nice example, I think. I'm not entirely sure about music. Just because I think music is just so varied across culture, right? And I'm not entirely sure if there are certain universal aspects to music that could transcend that sort of, you know, human culture, human society, etc. For example, you know, the octaves or the perfect pitch, even. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on music. It's one of my research areas, language and music. So I will reserve that for another time, and maybe we get into language and music, to the latter half of the class. But great examples. Another one that I just thought of when you said music is mathematics, because I think mathematics is a lot more universal than music. Because, I mean, a number means that particular number in any society and language, right? So I think in that sense, it's a little bit easier to see why mathematics is a system of signs than music, right? In terms of that universality. So great job. Okay, let's see. Erin, I forget who else was in that room with you. Ephraim, maybe, Olivia, and Miranda?
Yeah, so kind of sticking with the traffic light theme, we talked about the crosswalk lights, how like the red hand means don't walk, the little white walking person means that you're allowed to go. Right. And I guess the rule with that would be that when it's flashing, that means it's about to change. So either finish walking or keep staying. So that one, we also said that like arrows, like whether it's on a sidewalk, whether it's a traffic sign, that indicates that you should probably follow in that direction of the arrow. The third one we said was like, this one I'm not so sure because it kind of falls in the realm of music, but a conductor, certain signs they do or certain like where you're positioned, that means you're in a different, like how many beats per measure of the music. And I don't know how universal that one is,
Right.
but at least conductors in the United States, they might follow the same one, you know.
Right.
Then I can't remember what our last one was. So if anyone else wants to pop in and say what that was, I'll stop talking.
I don't know how universal this one is either, but we also talked about like emergency signals and sounds. Like an ambulance, for example, you know, there's an emergency if you hear the sounds from an ambulance behind you.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, and so you know the music one, Olivia, I think that's you're on the right track with that one, because when you say Western classical music with conductors, that is universal, right? I mean, any Western classical music, whether you're in the United States or Europe or Vienna or, you know, any of the places where Western classical music is conducted, the conductor has the same kind of hand gestures, right? That's not going to change. That's universal. So you're on the right track with that one. So, so Landon and Kelly and, you know, your team, maybe having that a little bit more restricted instead of just saying music as a whole, is on the right track, I think. Kelly?
Yeah, and I was just going to say in defense of our musical sign system, like the actual musical staff as it's written out, like if you see the note indicated as a C on the staff, that's universal.
Correct. Yes.
For anyone that plays music. So I guess in the written aspect, it's
correct.
A sign system. Okay.
Yes, the written, yes, the musical notes as written in Western classical music, universal. Yes, yeah. The way that the Western classical music conductor conducts music, universal. Yes, yeah. All right, great. Last team, Trinity, Nayel, Clara, and Melody.
So like one of the first things we brought up was typically, universally, any military kind of has a way to symbolize what squadron they belong to and like what rank they are. So for example, like military uniforms, the one I brought up was like the Air Force in the US has patches. Usually this is pretty universal, but there's a couple around that don't, but they usually have patches that tell which group they belong to. And I just completely blanked on everything else we talked about.
When I was in your breakout room, you were showing us your embroidery.
Yeah, that's
you want to show that to the class. Yeah.
So I embroider a lot because I need to occupy my hands, and they have like a grid here with a bunch of different symbols that symbolize what color you're supposed to use and what stitch it's supposed to be. And then it transfers onto this, and you have to follow the grid to get the design.
Yeah, that's a great example. I thought she was, you know, she was putting that up and I was in the breakout room. So, and I had never seen that before. I did not embroider, but, you know, I'd never seen that before. So I thought that was really a good example of a symbolic system. So yeah, great job. All right, let's continue on with the lecture. Okay, so great. So let's get into the grammar or the you know, the lexicon. We were talking about the lexicon, and now let's talk about how the lexicon is determined by the different grammatical structures and rules of language. So we very often talk about three substructures of language. Whenever you see any language, that language always has a phonology, a morphology, and syntax. So let's briefly talk about what each of these are, and then we will take each of them up in detail on Thursday, and we will talk a lot more about the different sound systems, etc. Phonology is the rules governing sound systems, right? We call sounds phones in linguistics. That's the terminology that we use, which is why we call the sound system of language phonology, right? Because it's the sound system of the phones, right? So here are some examples of how these different sounds actually sound like, or what the terminology in linguistics we use to describe sound systems. So we have m, right, written in those square brackets there to suggest that that's a phone. M is a nasal, p is a plosive, and O is a voiced vowel sound, but you know, you can call it a voiced sound and then have extra terminology to describe how O is different from U or E, etc., the different vowels. Now, why is phonology important to, you know, sound systems, and why is it important to us in Linguistics 151? Because you can have different languages with different phonological features. And you will be discovering a lot more about this in your assignment, right? The first assignment that you're going to be doing on natural language, and the second assignment that you will do on constructed language. So there are different possibilities expressed by phonological rules, and depending on the sound system that you choose, you are actually constraining how that particular language sounds like. So think of the sound system as the template for your language. How do you want your language to sound like? That is determined by the phonology of the sound systems, the sounds that you choose, the different phonological combinations that you actually have. And we will come back to phonology, like I said, not next week, the week after that. Okay. What is morphology? Morphology is when you have different morphemes. Morphemes are the smallest unit of meaning in language. When you take different morphemes and you combine them together, you get morphology, you get different words. So I've given you examples from English. When you have the word dog, you can say that a dog is a noun. It means dog, right? It's an animate noun, and it's a non-human. So you have a way of describing different morphemes and words. So go is a verb, it means to go, and it's an intransitive verb as opposed to a transitive verb, which takes a subject and an object. An intransitive verb, go, can only take a subject, right? So the dog is going, right? But the dog goes, but you cannot say the dog goes the cat, right? That's not allowed in an intransitive word. And z is the plural suffix of noun. So when you have a boy, you have boys, right? Even though you see that as written as an S in spelling, in phonology, it's actually a z, it's a voiced sound. That's why I've written that as a z and not as an S, because that's the phoneme, that's the phone. So that's a plural suffix of nouns. Now, here is a morphological rule for English, and I've given you that, you know, the note over there on not letting spelling mislead you. If you've taken 315 with me, you have probably heard this a million times, where I've told you that English spelling is misleading. Do not, you know, follow English spelling. We only care about how the word sounds like in English, right? That's what we care about, and that's where the phonology and the phonemes are coming in. So to express a morphological rule, you take different combinations of morphemes and you create new words in that particular language. So you have the word dog and the plural morpheme z, and now you have a new word in that language, dogs. So now, you know, you can already see for the 200 words in your constructed language, if you have a word like dog in your constructed language, you take the plural morpheme. If you have it as a morpheme, you could, you know, have other possibilities of creating plural morphology. But if you have that as a morpheme, you add the morpheme, now you get a new word, dogs, right? So now you're showing me how you can use morphology in your constructed language. So now you get two words for your constructed language. Now, again, you know, we saw this in the last lecture, that, you know, you can have different forms for similar meanings across languages. So for example, the word dog in French is chien. It is it doesn't look anything like dog in English, even though the meaning is the same. Or the word for grandparent in Amharic is ayat. And in English, as you know, it's a complex word, it's a compound word. You take the word grand, you take the word parent, you put it together, you get grandparent, versus in Amharic, it's actually a single morpheme, right? Ayat. So in English, for example, we have the ability to combine different words together, blend different words together to create compound words, where you're taking two different morphemes that have two different meaning, grand and parent, to create grandparent. You can also do grandfather, grandmother, grand aunt, right? I mean, the possibilities are just endless with compounding. But in Amharic, a Bantu language spoken in Ethiopia, the word for grandparent is only a single word, ayat, right? A lot of languages actually have that. Words can be single morphemes or complicated, complex morphemes, like combinations of two different morphemes or more. What about syntax? So when we have a good enough understanding of phonology and morphology, we can then get into complicated sentence structures, which is what syntax is all about. So when you combine different words and phrases, you create different sentences. And again, how you can create new sentences in a new language is determined by your sound system as well as your morphology. But also your word order plays a huge role in that, right? So when you have English, you have subject, verb, and object. John loves Mary, but in a lot of different languages, you have the subject, object, verb order, like in Japanese, John, Mary loves. But you also have languages which are verb first. So you have loves, John, Mary, like in Arabic. Arabic, you can start with a verb and then add in the subject and the object. So that's a different word order. There are different permutation and combinations possible for word orders. You can look into typology if you've maybe you've already done a class on that, but you can also just read up on typology of languages to kind of see what different word orders there are. And really doing your first assignment will give you, an idea of what different word orders can exist in languages and what different languages can actually do with that, kind of word orders. When you talk about syntax, it's kind of syntax in connection with morphology. We often talk about parts of speech or lexical categories of different kinds of words in languages. Very often we talk about nouns and verbs and adjectives in languages with, the controversial nature of adjectives is something that, again, I can have a dedicated class to it. That's what I did my PhD dissertation on languages that actually don't have adjectives. But, very often, if you look at old grammar books, you will see that old grammar books take adjectives to be a universal class or universal part of speech. I will tell you it's not. A lot of other researchers will tell you it's not. But it's a controversial, debatable topic. If you're interested in knowing more, I'm happy to give you additional readings on that. But nouns and verbs, I think pretty much everybody agrees on that these are universal word categories. Almost every language has words that are nouns and words that are verbs. Very often children begin to acquire nouns and verbs before they acquire adjectives and before they acquire prepositions and adverbs. So very often you will see that children start to learn adjectives by the time they're 3 years old, 2.5, 3 years old, versus your first noun is most likely like 6 months to like a year or something like that. So there's also the delay in language acquisition that we see with different parts of speech. What are some examples of nouns? If you've taken 315 with me, you know my pet peeve about telling you that the way that you were taught what a noun, a verb, and an adjective is in middle school is wrong, right? Very often you're taught that, what's the classic definition? A thing, right? A noun is a place or a thing or something like that, right?
A person, a place, or a thing.
Correct.
Or an idea.
Correct. That's absolutely wrong. Okay. So if there's anything that you take from Linguistics 151, if there's anything that you take from linguistics, the way that you're taught lexical categories is not the way that you should be learning them in middle school or elementary school or high school. Okay. I've seen that the way that you've been taught these things in grammar school, which really comes from the traditional thinking of descriptive grammar, that any language can be described using descriptive terminology, is completely wrong. It doesn't really work with linguistics, right? The way that I want you to think about a noun is a word that can combine itself with the determiner. Okay, what are determiners? Determiners are things like the, these, my, and, etc. And nouns are words such as circus, pajamas, story, etc. So you can say, I went to watch the circus, right, in English. These are my pajamas. My story was published in a novel, my story was published as a novel or something like that. So you can see that in English, it's very easy to understand what nouns are because they often combine with determiners. Why do we say that this is a syntactic way of describing what a noun is? Because now you know that a verb cannot combine with the determiner. You cannot say the go, the sleep, right? I mean, unless you use sleep as a noun, which you can. But if you're using sleep as a verb, you cannot use the determiner with the verb, right? So that is a syntactic, a linguistic way of thinking about nouns. What about verbs? Verbs can combine with auxiliary verbs. These are auxiliary verbs like can, might, will, have in English. And verbs in English are things like eat, leave, go, etc. And adverbs are things like always, then, surely, etc. Now, you might be looking at this and saying, oh my God, why is she teaching me grammar? Like I know all these things. Trust me, when I ask you, I give you a word in English and I ask you whether this is a noun or an adjective or a verb, everybody freaks out. Okay, I've seen this now and again in 315. The reason is because a lot of this grammar instruction was taken out from your elementary and middle school, thanks to some bill that was passed in the 1960s or 1970s, because somebody thought the same thing, right? You know English, you know your grammar. Why do you need to explicitly be taught all these things in, elementary school and middle school? What I have been finding then is that when you sit in linguistic classes in the university level, I've had to teach all this from scratch, just because, you think you know it, but you actually don't. Like when I actually test you, in morphology assignments, people are like, oh yeah, is this a noun or an adverb or an adjective? How do I know, right? So that's why I kind of tend to do this in Linguistics 151. I'm sorry if it's repetitive and you know all this, but, I like to give everybody the benefit of doubt. So if you need it, it's here, okay? If you already know this, I'm sorry that it's repetitive, but. So these are verbs, they combine with auxiliary verbs and adverbs, and then adjectives, they combine with noun phrases, right? So examples of adjectives are color terms like red, terms like big, extraordinary. So you can say the big circus, these red pajamas, my extraordinary story. So it comes in between the determiner and the adjective, right? The big circus, not big the circus. It always has to go, in between. With adjectives, again, like I said, it's universality of adjective is questionable. So there's a lot of discussion on the ordering of adjectives as well. If you put two adjectives together, how do you get the order? So can you say the big red car, or do you have to say the red big car? Right? So there's a lot of questions on that. It's again a great research project if somebody wants to do, completely, an open topic. Nobody knows the answer to that. And again, like I said, I really like adjectives. I worked on that for my PhD dissertation. So if you have questions on adjectives, feel free to ask me. But we are out of time, so that's where I'm going to stop, and I will continue with this lecture slide on Thursday. Any questions before we say bye-bye? All right, sounds great. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday. And if in the meantime, if you have any questions, do come to my office hours. It starts in about 15 minutes from now. All right, bye.